Hello, and welcome back to Plantopia. Plantopia is the plant health podcast of the American Phytopathological Society, and I'm your host, Matt Kasson. I'm an associate professor of forest pathology and mycology at West Virginia University. This is the 10th episode of Season 4 of Plantopia, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Ilse Alejandra Huerta Arredondo, assistant professor of agriculture in the Department of Agronomy, housed within the Division of Life Sciences at Universidad de Guanajuato in Irapuato, Mexico, where she specializes in natural and social agricultural sciences. Originally from Irapuato, Dr. Huerta Arredondo completed a BS in agronomy at the Universidad de Guanajuato in 2010, a Master's of Science in Plant Pathology from Penn State University in 2014, and a PhD in Agricultural and Extension Education with a dual degree in International Agriculture and Development from Penn State in 2020. She is co-founder of the Latinx Agricultural Network, which won the National Extension Award for Diversity in 2022. From 2020 through 2022, Dr. Huerta Arredondo served as a part-time instructor of agriculture at her current institution before assuming her full-time faculty role in October 2022. She teaches courses in plant pathology, rural sustainable development, vegetable production, and vegetable plant protection. Welcome, Ilse.
Thank you, Matt. It was so nice to see you now.
Absolutely. So you grew up in central Mexico in a big city called Irapuato. Is that how you say it?
Yeah. I don't think it was like a very big city, but it's fairly big.
Okay, it's equivalent to Madison, Wisconsin. It's got over 400,000 people. So we compare it to State College, it's pretty big.
It is big. It is big. I was thinking maybe Mexico City or compared to other big cities in Mexico, but yeah.
Sure. And this is in the Mexican state of Guanajuato.
Correct.
Tell us about your experiences growing up there. And when was your first interaction with agriculture?
Thanks for asking that. Actually, I that story because it was a little surprising also for me. I'm the youngest of four. My family doesn't work directly with agriculture, but they do have interaction. My dad used to sell agricultural machinery.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So let me go back a little bit. My grandparent, my grandparent from my dad's side, he does have land. He's already 100 years, by the way. He's still
Oh, wow.
still around. Yeah, he's a great person, and he does have land. But when he was young, his dad sent him, I think, to Canada or the U.S., and they started bringing agricultural machinery from the U.S. or Canada, and eventually they started bringing certain brand, a red one, and they became like the main dealers here in all the area. So they were basically the ones that were selling or technifying, or how can I say it?
They were a dealership essentially for
Yeah, they were the
this agricultural equipment.
It started all the equipment, and the reason why that happened, part of the reason, was because during the Green Revolution, Norman Borlaug, he came, know him, he came to our state and to other states, and he was doing some field trials with farmers. And one of the farms that he was working with was with my great grandparent. So we have a pretty nice picture of them with other scientists. And my grandfather was young. He got into that boat of the Green Revolution. So
Yeah.
they started bringing agricultural machinery to the area. And of course, they had land and everything. But eventually, he almost never worked the land, but he was renting it. So other people was working at big companies in Mexico.
Yeah. So basically, as part of this Green Revolution, and Norman Borlaug and other scientists from the U.S. coming down to partner with Mexican agricultural specialists and farmers, I'm sure there was like this witnessing of the huge jump in production with all these new kind of machinery, right? Is that something that like your grandparent?
Yeah, that my grandparents noticed, and I feel like they were a visionary. They were saying, of course, they met Norman Borlaug, and he was friends with him, and I didn't know any of this until I was already studying agronomy. So that's like my family history. And my dad was working with selling agricultural machinery. And when I was growing up, I'm the youngest of four. I actually never thought about studying agronomy, but I enjoyed a lot going to like the farms and being there, or going with my dad to the agricultural fairs and just watching everything. So I thought I was going to be a lawyer, but I felt like that was just too, like a too much pressure, and I wanted to do something that I enjoyed. So I thought, why not going into agriculture, which is something that I enjoy, like going with my dad and being at the farms and everything. And that's how I went into agriculture. And later, my grandfather told me, "Oh, I have a friend in Texas. Actually, I already have the paper. I still have the paper. It says Norman Borlaug, and he gave me a phone number, but I never called him or anything." And later, I realized how important it was, this friendship.
You have a picture of your grandfather with Norman Borlaug?
I do, yeah. I
Oh, I would love to see that. That's really cool. And actually, that would be really nice if you're willing to. We could put that in the notes section of the podcast episode.
No, absolutely. We have a big family, and actually, no one understood the importance of that interaction and that work until I came into agriculture. I'm the only one in the whole family that it's in agriculture.
Yeah, I was going to ask if your siblings got into to agronomy or agriculture as well.
No, not directly. My dad has 11. There are 11 siblings, and then grandchildren, we are more than 30,
Mm.
and even great grandchildren. And I'm the only one that is in agriculture. My sister study international commerce with agribusiness or something like that too.
Okay. So you go to the university there in Guanajuato, which is the Universidad de Guanajuato, and they have about 47,000 students. So a pretty sizable university.
Yeah, it's big. It's big. It has different campuses. One of the campus is the Life Sciences Division currently. And when I studied, it was the Agricultural Sciences Institute.
What kind of experiences during your time there studying agronomy did you have that made you think, I might like to study plant pathology?
In fifth semester, I was taking plant pathology, and the professor approached me and he said, "Would you like to work in testing a product that a company sent me?" I was like, "Sure." I did this summer internship in plant pathology, and we were evaluating a product that was going to be used for strawberry
Mm.
in soil. So that was my first approach. I liked it. We continued the project working on fungal and bacterial pathogens. And then later in my career, another professor, Dr. Eduardo Salazar, he approached me and told me, "Hey, Ilse, have you ever thought about studying a master's and a PhD? Because we are getting older, the professors here, and we need students that have been in the university and would like to come back and renew the academic group."
Mhm.
And I was like, "That's a good idea, actually." Also, you mentioned that I was at my home when I was doing my undergrad, and I was thinking that I wanted to have another experience and go out. And that's when I used my internship, which is the last semester of the undergrad program. You have to do one semester of internship. And I was able to find internship thanks to Secretary Samuel Hayes, which used to be the secretary in Pennsylvania and used to do a lot of travel to Guanajuato, bringing students to Guanajuato. He would bring students from Penn State here and just making this collaboration of exchanges. So in one of his visits, I approached him and I said, if I would love to go to Penn State, if he could help me find an internship there. And he did. He was so helpful. And he helped me get into Penn State in fall 2009. So I worked in that internship that he created for me.
Mhm.
I worked with Dr. Beth Gugino at Penn State. I worked with Dr. Bill Lamont at the horticulture program, with Dr. Michael Orsolek. And I interviewed with many professors at Penn State. It was very interactive internship. So I was able to be at the field in plant pathology, but what I enjoyed the most was working with Dr. Beth Gugino. And from there, I really continued the relationship too. I came back to Mexico. I prepared for the GRE, which I had no idea what it was, the TOEFL and everything, to come back and do my master's.
And that's where we intersected. I started at Penn State in plant pathology in 2007 and graduated there in 2012. And we overlapped for a few years. Those opportunities are really important stepping stones for, like you said, figuring out that you wanted to do a graduate degree, in your case, 2 graduate degrees at Penn State. You do a master's first in plant pathology, finishing that in what, 2014?
Uh-huh.
And what did you focus on for your master's?
Yeah, for my master's, I focused on late blight on tomato. It was, I don't know if it was a longer program than most of them, but it took me almost 3 years because we did field trials and lab work. What we did was I was evaluating methylaxyl sensitivity to several isolates from Pennsylvania, just to make sure because late blight has this ability to become resistant with all this diversity that it can have. So we were evaluating their sensitivity to methylaxyl in the lab. And in the field, it was a big field trial. We were evaluating basically forecasting systems. We were evaluating a Cornell forecast system that was new against Blindcast and against a 7-day program. And of course, when with our control. But we were using two products. We were using chlorothalonil and we were using copper. So in two different systems, conventional or organic. And we were using two materials for tomato, one that was resistant and one that was susceptible. It was a lot because it was the cultivar, it was the fungicide, it was the timing of application. All the information was used to feed and strengthen the Cornell decision support system that was being created or evaluated.
That makes sense. I find it interesting that you studied late blight. You mentioned that you had listened to the episode with Manning Gallagly and his work in the Toluca Valley of Mexico and the importance of late blight and late blight research in Mexico. Does that play into your interest in late blight?
I think it was a coincidence, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I learned later about all the importance of late blight and of Phytophthora in Mexico and all the history behind it with my country. But actually, when I went in Penn State in 2009, there was a huge epidemic, remember?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. So when I remember that when I was in fall 2009, Dr. Gugino, she was so busy working with farmers and with the public in teaching them, explaining, helping them combat late blight because you had a big epidemic in Pennsylvania with late blight. So when I came back, she was like, "We're still working on this, and since you were there when this happened, you'll probably be interested." And I was like, I am interested. And there was funding and everything. And now that I'm back here in Mexico, late came back to my life.
Yeah. And then you pivoted from there, right? You went from studying pathosystems and research plant pathology to pursuing an equally important topic, but you pivoted to ag education, extension, international ag and development. And it's there where you looked at concerns about the safety of Latino and Latina workers in farms in Pennsylvania. What drove that decision?
Going back to my experience in my master's program at Penn State, I in a continuing learning progress as we all are, right? When I was there with Dr. Gugino, I realized that she does research and extension. And I was like, extension? What's extension? So I went with her to several farmer meetings. And of course, her projects were very related and very connected with the farming community. And I was like, that is so cool. I like that. We are able to get information and just put it into the people that are going to use it almost right away. So I was like, why don't we have that in Mexico? I would love to have that working similarly. Of course, we have in Mexico some programs and institutions that do that, but it's not framed or structured the same that it's in the US. When I was doing my master's with her, I really enjoyed the program and I enjoyed that part. But I was noticing and watching at some of the other students that were doing their PhD, probably not you because you also were a lot out there, but others, I was looking that every time with the PhD, you focus a little bit more in one little aspect. And I was scared that I would get away from the farming community and eventually get trapped in something really small and I couldn't go out. And especially my idea that I was going to come back to Mexico. So I wanted to innovate and offer something different to the university, to the people that are here. So that's why I went back after my program because of personal things that happened in our life, we decided to come back to Mexico. And I thought that I was not going to do a PhD. But then when I was here, my husband, Miguel, started telling me, I can see that you didn't finish what you were started. You wanted to do your PhD and everything.
Right.
And he motivated me a lot. And I said, yes, I want to. You're right, I want to. But I want to do an extension because I was working at the university teaching some classes as an instructor. But I was like, they don't do extension here. So I want to get and work with extension. And what I wanted to do was going back to Penn State because they also had the INTAD program, the International Agriculture and Development. I wanted to go there and I said, and I will go there and so I can do that dual degree and can do something related to our country, to Mexico, either evaluate a program here or piloting a program or something. That's why I went back, and then things happened and the Latino project came into place.
And that was really like it was an exploratory approach to study Latino farming and the role of the cooperative extension and kind of reducing barriers to engagement and things like that.
Correct. Yeah, when I went back I was fortunate that they accepted me in the program, and I went back. They asked me, what project do you want to do? And I was like, this time I prepared better because when my master's, I just feel like I went and didn't know what to do. And this time I prepared better, and I talked to people in Mexico and I prepared to see what kind of project I could do.
Mhm.
But things didn't happen the way we wanted. So I was like, okay, but what can I still do for my community while I'm there? And I started going to a meeting that Dr. Elsa Sanchez and other extension agents in Pennsylvania and Penn State did, like Tara Bauer, Maria Gorgo. And they had this one meeting where I think they got a funding from SARE, because they were already approaching the Latino community at Penn State. And when in that meeting, they were teaching, I think, extension agents how to approach and how to be more culturally sensitive. But one of them, I remember so good, one of them said, yes, this is great and everything, but we don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. You're training me for something that I don't know when I'm going to use it and with who I'm going to use it. And that's when it clicked to me. Oh, I have my project here.
Right.
We should work in smoothing those connections between extension and the Latino community, especially the farm workers.
I think that's a really worthwhile topic. I really like the role extension plays, outreach and community engagement. I think it's so critical to meet people where they are. It seems like with connecting with the Latina farm workers in Pennsylvania and elsewhere in the U.S., there are a lot of barriers. Do you think that we've made some good progress in reducing those barriers?
Yeah, I think they've done a lot. And I know that elsewhere in the United States, like in Texas, California, where they have a big Latino community or Latinx community, I would say, they're doing better because they are realizing how important the community is, especially in this transition. We all know that the farming community in the US and in Mexico too, and I guess everywhere in the world, is getting older. We are thinking like, who are the ones that are coming to be in those shoes or going to start working in the fields?
Mhm.
Big companies, or who are going to be those, we can say, small farmers that are very important in the agricultural sector. And in the US, well, they have been doing a lot, thankfully. But one of those populations that might come into place are the Latinx, right? Because they are already there. They're already in the fields and everything. So they're transitioning. So if you ask me if they've done a good progress, yeah, I think especially at Penn State, they created the LAN, the Latinx Agricultural Network,
Mhm.
which connects extension agents, community, professors or the academics, and the families of the Latinx community or the farm workers, the farmers. And that's been helpful. And in Texas, there's also people that are working with the community. So I think it's gaining interest.
So I'm interested in in juxtaposing what an experience in Mexico versus kind of what we have here in the U.S. And what I see is that I think that there's really good working relationships between extension and extension agents, universities, and farmers. But the general public perceives those two groups as being in conflict almost, like that the university workers, professors are pretentious and don't meet farmers where they're at and don't appreciate their expertise. But I would say it's quite the opposite. Do you think that there's a good level of respect from the general public towards professors in Mexico? And are there really good relationships between people like yourself and the farming community there?
That's something that I'm working on improving as well, because I actually think that's better in the US.
Okay.
That the extension service has been in place for more than 100 years. And I apologize, but you were asking before what were the barriers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and
I know that you like looked at some of these, or these are correct questions you asked about engagement barriers, but also other barriers. Yeah.
yeah, because one of the aspects was exactly what you were asking me right now about Mexico. We don't experience that interaction a lot between professors and the farming. I think most of the, I would say, extension, and I quote it, extension, it's done by private companies.
Okay.
So it's not objective. Of course, they're biased into having making farmers use the product or certain practices, and we don't have this structure of extension like you have in the US. But when farmers or when Latinx farmers are in the US, of course, they don't know about those tools that exist there because we don't have them in Mexico or in their countries, Colombia, wherever they came from. Extension doesn't work the same. So that's why I feel like that's one of the big barriers.
I wanted to come back to a point there, and like I see what you're saying, that extension as an entity is much more developed and has a longer history and a track record of providing positive outcomes to farmers. But I think informally, you are uniquely positioned in your university because you have family ties to the agricultural industry. And as such, there's a way for you to connect with farmers, even in a system that doesn't really have a formal extension. Kind of,
Exactly.
yeah.
I think you are right exactly where I feel like I can help or where I believe I am at. I am a person that is connected. I'm someone that is connected with the agricultural community thanks to my family ties, and my husband is also a farmer, a large farmer here with his family. So in a way I come from a background, yeah, that has stronger ties to the agricultural community. So I can provide my plant pathology knowledge. I can put it into place with my extension knowledge, with my international connections. That's what I think that in this intersection, and I'm hoping that these learned abilities that I've developed, I want to put them into good, no, into to being helpful for my community. And a way that I'm trying to do that is, for example, I'm doing seminars, agricultural international seminars. I'm organizing those so that my students, and they're open to the public, they're open to everyone, and can learn about other people in other places. Because I wish I could have done that, or I could have that when I was an undergrad. Like I told you, I came to Penn State and I was like, oh, I didn't know what extension was, or that all these things existed.
But I love the fact that you are now an assistant professor. Since 2022, you're an assistant professor at the university that you were an undergrad at. So, yeah, you've come full circle, but you are in a great position to bring that knowledge back. And I understand it's clear that you're doing that and working towards that. I'm sure that's both inspiring, but also it might feel like a huge responsibility. Is that the case? Like, basically, like, if you want to see extension
Oh
be
yeah.
what it is in the US,
Oh,
in your state in Mexico, then you have to do it. It's on your shoulders in a way.
yeah, yeah, I've thought about that, but I would like, of course, it's not possible that I can do it. But I can start preparing the land, putting some seeds in the ground, and eventually they will flourish, and someone else will be able to harvest all this. And it's not only me; other people in Mexico are working on that. And actually, I was also very fortunate to be part of a network that exists currently between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. It's called the North American Agricultural Advisory Network, the NAM with triple A. And this is a network that it's actually wanting to connect extension between Canada, the US, and Mexico. practices, ways to be better, ways to exchange information, just a big network. In one way or the other, coincidence or not, I was there for the first meeting last year in the US. That was in Colorado. And I think they are working with others. It's not only collaborating in a way with other people in Mexico that I didn't know that we're doing extension as well. And one way or the other, we're just trying to make it happen, or eventually we'll do something similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gaining the trust of the public, I would say that's and connecting this, strengthening this bridge between the academics and the farmers.
I'm interested to hear a little bit more about differences that may exist. And you spent a decade, right, in State College, about a decade?
Yeah.
What are some other ways that Penn State is different from the university? American universities are different from Mexican universities that our listeners might be interested in knowing, what's unique, or your university that you'd like to talk
Yeah,
about.
my university, because I know there are some universities in Mexico like the UNAM, or in case of agriculture, Chapingo, that are also really big universities in agriculture and might be a little bit more similar in experiences to some of the universities in the US. But no, it's just another world. All the infrastructure, the way classes are also, because for example, I know that you in the US for undergrad, you can have your major and your minor, right? And it can be very diverse, just the way you want it to do your program, whatever classes you want to take. Here we have a more structured program. This is the program, these are the classes you have to take, and they don't have many options currently in our current program. Of course, the US being a country that is more developed and that probably invests more in education and in science and everything, I never had issues. Or I remember that I was in heaven when I was doing my research because we would have the money to conduct field trials or to buy whatever lab equipment and everything. And here I have to be very creative for
Right.
conducting science. I have to be very creative because we don't have the funds, we don't have the infrastructure as big in my university. We have enough, we have it's good, but we have to be more creative because in general in Mexico science mm, we don't have as much money, and we even joke about what are the things that sometimes you use in the lab that that we like people in developed countries would never do. Reusing some equipment or using, I don't know, crystal things from your kitchen that sometimes
Yeah.
instead of
Instead of buying VWR
correct
Tupperware containers.
the parafilm. I Parafilm is, oh my god, it's just a luxury. I was using some parafilm yesterday and I was like, wow. We use like plastic different, and I know I don't want it to like make it here horrible, but we have to be creative. Like not horrible as in terms of, oh, poor scientists. No, we have to be creative. Also, I do have an appointment of teaching research and extension.
Yeah.
And that's different. Like you were saying, there probably you have an appointment of teaching and research or research and extension, but it's more percentages, of course. But here I have tried to do it all, and I teach a lot.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your various aspects of your job. Obviously, I know that while you're at Penn State, you taught or co-taught or helped instruct fungal jungle and global agriculture. And currently you teach plant pathology, rural sustainable development. What is your research focused on now? And what would you like to focus on? Obviously, you're 2 years into your position, so you can't do everything immediately. What's your research program look like, and what do you want it to look like in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So I was very lucky, and I would say of that these international connections in a way. When I got my appointment, of course, I had a plan of conduct research and everything. I was lucky that with my international ties, I still talk to a lot of friends, and one of them, Dr. Emily Pfeiffer, which you know her well, she contacted me once and she said, "Ilse, you're back in Mexico, right?" And she know, of course, that I was working on late blight because she was doing her PhD when I was doing my master's. And she said, I have a person that she's interested in doing some research or getting some samples from Mexico. And this is Dr. Alina Puig from the USDA, from ARS. So we contacted, and part of my research now is again working with late blight, but this time I'm connecting with farmers because we're getting samples. And the idea is just to see As in Mexico, we have much more diversity, and they are interested in learning how, if these pathogens or if these isolates that we are getting in Mexico are the ones that probably you are seeing also in the US. One of the aspects is that I have to do small projects, I would say, because I have more undergrads than masters. I only have a couple of master students, and they are not working probably directly with me because it's a different master project, not a full time. They are people that work and that they only do study during the weekends. So one of them is again like with late light, we're getting isolates, and I have students that help me with that. And we're probably just going to do small things like again, sensitivity studies, fungicide sensitivity studies.
Mhm.
Another aspect that I'm interested in is in berries. Here in my state, we grow a lot of berries, blueberry, a raspberry, of course, a strawberry. It's getting really big in berry production. And there's not a lot of information on what pathogens and pests and everything we have. Of course, growers know, but it's not documented a lot. So
Right.
we are starting to, I'm interested in start documenting all that information.
By percentages, what's the most popular berry grown there?
It used to be strawberry. Actually, my city, Irapuato, it's known as the strawberry city. It used to be strawberry the biggest, but now it's other cities are bigger in strawberry, like Michoacan, other states, Michoacan, Baja California. But now, currently, we grow a lot of blueberry.
Going back to your undergrad, I think you said you did, was it you were testing soil treatments for strawberry pathogens?
Yes,
Our experiences that shape us end up being a part of the future us.
I know, and exactly. It's funny that somehow or the other you can come back to similar experiences, but now with better tools, I would say.
And it also informs like what you said. You said strawberries used to be popular. Obviously, you were working on fumigants or something related to problems growing strawberries. So apparently, the problems were such that they became less profitable or less enjoyable to grow there, and blueberries won out.
Yeah, the thing that happened with strawberry in Irapuato, one of them probably was was pathogens, but I think it was also aspects of the commercial aspects. No, Michoacan, Baja California is strategically located below California, so it's very easy to export from there. Water in Mexico is also an issue, and then in Michoacan, a lot of companies came and just put everything with more technologies to grow the strawberries. And here we stayed more, a little bit more traditional. Not currently, we also have a lot of technology, but it happened that way that the company started going to Michoacan and it grew a lot. So we are like third in place currently in Mexico. But yeah, we have some issues in talking about pathogens. In strawberry, we've experienced a big problem that they believe came from plants that are bought in the US, maybe. So we started having a problem that they didn't have, which is Pestalotia or Neopestalops
Yum.
rosa. That was a big problem for farmers here. Yeah, that diminished a lot. And it's really pretty recent.
So one of the things that came up during this interview, and obviously something that I can relate to, is kids and work-life balance and those kinds of things. Obviously, you're a new professor. I know you were like a part-time professor in the years leading up to you becoming like a full-time assistant professor. What's the kind of views on work-life balance in Mexico, and do you feel like it's better than it is in the US? I often think about the US system and how it's not as inclusive an environment as it could be because it perpetuates kind of workaholism and these
Yeah.
kinds of concepts. And people with kids, especially if you have kids in grad school, they get pushed aside or
Yeah.
looked at as lazy, which is
Yeah.
definitely not the case. They're just trying to balance way more things. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's being a mom and starting this position as an assistant professor. It's rough. I mean, it's rough. But I often think about how would it be in the US, even though I think that something in the US, there's more diversity of ideas. And if you're lucky, you'll find people that are in similar situations as you and that will be understanding of your situation. However, I feel like I'm probably better in right now in Mexico because I'm back in my city and I have all my social network, like my parents and like my sister. somehow it's not all I have my community. Very unique because not all the professors have that. I have other professors that have kids and they're coming from other cities and they don't have that. But in my case, that's helpful. I don't live pretty close currently to the university. I'm like 26 miles away from the city where the university is at. Every day I have to leave home before 7 a.m. to drop kids at school. Some days, fortunately, they are there until 2:30 or even 4. And my mom lives pretty close, but it's a whole different coordination. Every day my mind has to be like, oh, who's picking the kids? Is it me? Is it someone else? What are they eating? And it's hard, it's rough. My husband, he's at the farm almost every day, but of course, he's there. He's a full-time parent too.
Yeah. It's funny when you said, what about going on today? I immediately, as a parent of 3 boys, I immediately looked to the clock and I was like, oh my God, am I running late for something? But that's like the constant fear of the parent. I think about the work-life balance and these things all the time. I don't have a lot of siblings, but I have 50 first cousins. I have a huge family. And we all lived in the same area of Northeast Pennsylvania, but I don't live there anymore. But like, there's this conversation to be had about the kind of system we put in place that make people move around for postdocs away from family. People are just so much more productive and happier when they have family network around. And they don't have to be blood related, but just that community of people that support you and allow you to be successful.
Matt, that is absolutely true. There's two things I want to say. First, when I was at Penn State and I was like finishing my PhD program, of course I started applying to positions here and there, especially in the US. But I was trying to apply to positions that were closer to Mexico.
Yeah.
And then I believe in God, and I was basically putting everything in His hands. I was like saying, I'll be happy to wherever life takes me. Of course, I finished in 2020. I was the first one to defend in a virtual manner.
Oh, yeah. The pandemic
Yeah, my
broke
room
out.
was already scheduled. The room was already scheduled for my presentation and everything, and then it happened. So life happened, and it brought me back to Mexico, and I couldn't be happier because I believe that my kids should be growing in a culture similar to the one that I grew up, because I know it's hard for those that have a culture, I would say Latinx or from other country, and that they live in the US. You have so much benefits, but I think in a way it's also hard to because your kids are growing in a different culture than you, and that makes it difficult. So I wanted to my kids would experience their childhood close to family, close
Yeah.
to their grandparents, close to their cousins, to everyone, so that they have this similar culture of they were born both in Pennsylvania. Maybe they will go back when they're all adults or something. But
I also think about the oral histories that our families provide and pass down through generations. I know in certain cultures that kind of oral tradition is even more important. But coming back to how we opened this interview, you telling the story of your grandfather who's 100 years old, and when he was a kid, like the connection with Norman Borlaug and things like that. You could tell those stories, but it's probably more interesting to hear from your 100-year-old grandfather, and the ability for your kids to interact with your parents and your parents' parents is just it's an irreplaceable thing. And it's not only important for like our culture and our families, but like it ties agriculture to our own personal histories.
of course, someone that works at the university this week or last week, she was asking me. She has an administrative position. She was seeing me. I went with her to give her a paper or something, and she always is sometimes running. And she said, Ilse, you studied here, right? You did your undergrad here. And I was like, yes, why? And she's like, we can see it. We can see it when someone studied here because we can see how they work, I don't know, happier, or they basically put more effort, and there's something in it. And I was like, that's true. Sometimes we want to take us away for the experience, like you were saying, postdoc here,
Yeah.
master's there, PhD in another place. But we are more productive, happier, more fulfilled, or I don't know, when we are close to our house. And something interesting also that I was going to mention, when this professor that motivated me to do my master's, he said, have you, the story I told you, have you thought about doing your master's? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. But he's not old, but he's this systemic approach or something. But he was telling me, because I was already dating my husband, and he told me, but you shouldn't marry it now. You shouldn't get married now, because if not, you will. He was thinking that I would leave my studies and everything away, and I was like, and I remember that I didn't like that, but I was like, oh, I'm going to show him that it's super.
The motivating force.
Yeah. And we got married, and I told Miguel, would you, if I would go and do my master's, would you come with me? Because he was also working in the farm, and
Yeah.
his mom needed him right here in Mexico for health reasons and everything. And he was like, no, I would go. Of course, will, let's do this. And I don't think I would have done it if I had decided otherwise.
Yeah. It's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you, Matt. I'm really so happy and humble of being here today. I hope that someone else enjoys this one.
Absolutely. We've just heard from Dr. Ilse Alejandra Huerta Arredondo, Assistant Professor of Agriculture in the Department of Agronomy at Universidad de Guanajuato, Mexico. As always, be sure to check out the show notes section for links to Ilse's work. I'm Matt Kasson, host of Plantopia. Thanks for listening.